Welcome, everyone, to episode 98 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden, your host. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen or watch this episode. Because this is episode 98, I know we're nearing 100, but because this is episode 98, I did want to take this moment to talk about the 1998 team. I haven't really dove into this team too much, over this podcast. It's been a lot about the current team. I obviously is now 19 years old, but I was not alive in 1998. My parents were, but I did want to just go over the stats and some of the cool moments and talk about some of the positive moments that happened in the World Series. I know they obviously got swept. They still have not won a single World Series game in the Padres franchise history, but I still wanted to go over the positive moments and definitely the positive moments of the season and some of the unique trends as we look back that some people like me who weren't alive or some just casual fans back then that might not remember about some of the key players in that season and they weren't like the big names that you probably think of, at least, the biggest names. So let's have some fun with this episode. I know that 98 didn't end the way Padre fans wanted it to, but because this is episode 98, I wanted to talk about the 98 team a little bit. So let's start off here. As for the YouTube audience, I'll share my screen. Before, I wanted to end on a good note. So we'll start kind of here with the World Series in 98. Obviously, I'm not going to go too much into what happened in the playoff run. I just wanted to go through the season stats after this World Series, just because I think, the World Series is, at least for me, that's what I'm going to remember, what happened, statistic wise, and just kind of just going back. And obviously, so they get swept. I know I wanted to be positive here, but obviously they get swept. Game one, obviously, to me, is what it feels like. I know that game three, seems like they had the best chance losing 5-4, but game one, that really felt like the heartbreaker. At least whenever I've talked to my parents about it, people that were alive, that kind of felt like the turning point there. And it was a really an uphill battle, ever since, once they lost that game, it kind of became a big uphill battle, which is really unfortunate. What I will say about this game in terms of the positive things, obviously whenever I look up the 98 game and the Padres highlights and all that, they talk about the Tony Gwynn home run in the fifth inning and to right field. And that's a big moment. I know why it is, because it was the best Padre player in franchise history hitting a home run in the World Series, right? That's a big moment off the Yankee, at Yankee Stadium. That makes it a big moment. But I think I don't want it to be forgotten that Greg Vaughn hit 2 home runs in this game. And so going back to the positive things in this game, the Padres did have a lead in this game before it was tied up at 5. Before it got tied back up, they had, I believe, a 5-2 lead in this game after Greg Vaughn homered twice, and then obviously Tony Gwynn and Greg Vaughn hitting back-to-back home runs. So as you can go here, let's go a little bit more here. Again, this is for the YouTube audience. I'm on the baseball reference page, just kind of explaining for the audio audience. So 5th inning, off of David Wells, former Padre, by the way, back-to-back home runs. And this is the positive moment, the big positive moments for the Padres in that World Series, which is what I really want to touch on. We already know, obviously, like I mentioned, what happened. But to touch on the positive moments, some of the forgotten or maybe just not talked about as much positive moments, the back-to-back home runs by Tony Gwynn and then Greg Vaughn. Everyone talks about the Tony Gwynn home run. Like I mentioned, I know why. But Greg Vaughn, obviously a big year that year, hits 2 home runs in that game. And so let's show it to you here. Next page. Okay, so here's the Greg Vaughn moments. Talking about Greg Vaughn's first home run here. 2-run shot to right center field, and then Tony, obviously, that was Greg Vaughn's first, and then Tony's second home run goes to right field. I mean, this is an iconic moment. Yankee Stadium, off the porch. Greg Vaughn back to back again, and then just deposits this right into left field fence, right into left field. I mean, just yeah, we don't need to see these. Thank you. We don't need to see the Yankees coming back, but just right down the middle, Greg Vaughn just smashes this home run. So I just don't want it to be forgotten that Greg Vaughn did hit 3 home runs in this game. But that's really kind of what I wanted to touch on. Like, to be quite honest, that's what I wanted to touch on was Greg Vaughn hitting those 2 home runs and Tony obviously being talked about, right? He was talked about. That was the big moment. That was going to be, for years. And I understand why. And I think it should be because it is an iconic moment so far in this franchise's history. Because I know that they didn't win the game, but Tony Gwynn hitting a home run at Yankee Stadium, at a famous stadium in the World Series, the Fall Classic, everything about it is classic. So I did want to touch on the positive moments there. Now, let's talk more about positives and some unique things that happened in this season. 1998 team, credit to who made this video, Sports Odyssey on YouTube. Just season highlights a little bit. I'm not going to play all of them. Just wanted to play some of these highlights that were found on YouTube here for the YouTube audience, and I'll walk you through some of them, but mostly just talking about the stats and everything that happened during that season. Some things that to be honest, when I was looking through these stats, I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know that this guy was this great in the season and all that. So just kind of want to go through that. For some in the audience, kind of like me, that were younger, they didn't go through this season. And I'm sure, my parents and people that, did go through it, they could tell you a whole lot more about it. But I did want to go through some highlights here. So this is obviously highlights. You have some music playing here, Friar. But as this music's kind of playing, I did want to talk about some of the unique quirks in this season, just stats in the season, guys in the season that fans that weren't alive like me may not remembered. There's a funny moment there with Tony. But so I think that, so they're going through the All-Star game here, Andy Ashby, Trevor, Tony. But I did want to talk about, let's just talk about the war leaders. That's where I kind of wanted to start off. 1998 war leaders. When you think about 1998, it's probably, Tony Gwynn, right? That's what the regular fan that didn't go through it would think. Oh, Tony was the best player that year, led in war and all that. And that's not really the case at all. There were actually 11 Padres that had a higher war than Tony did that year. That really showed that this team, was a team. It wasn't a one-man show. I know baseball can't really be a one-man show, but it was more than just Tony, and Trevor. So starting with the Warriors, Kevin Brown was obviously the big ace. He pitched in Game 4, which they ended up losing, but so he was on the mound. But he had a 9.1 WAR in 1998. Blew out everyone in terms of WAR. He was their best pitcher that season. And he'd end up getting the biggest, I think it was the first $100 million contract in Major League Baseball history. He'd end up getting that later. Greg Vaughn, again, arguably could have won MVP that year, 50 home run year. He hit 2 home runs in that Game 1 of the World Series that I just went over, some key moments. Obviously, 50 home runs, most home runs in Padres history ever in a single season. And he'll be a Padres legend pretty much forever. 50 home runs from him that year. Let's see, what else? So, and another common thing before I continue going through the war leaders is their starting lineup stayed healthy pretty much the whole year. I know in a lot in Major League Baseball now, there's a lot of injuries, a lot of things happen. There's not really, you don't see that Iron Man, that Cal Ripken Jr. anymore. You don't see a full lineup playing that consistent amount of games, to me at least, over 130 games and all that, 150 games, multiple guys, like in 1998, the Padres had. Carlos Hernandez, the catcher, 129 games. Wally Joyner, 131. Veras, the second baseman, 138 games. Chris Gomez at short, loved watching highlights of him, 145 games. Ken Caminiti, 131 games. Greg Vaughn, 158. So obviously you hit 50 home runs, you're going to stay healthy pretty much the whole year. But Steve Finley, 159 games, and Tony played 127. Mark Sweeney even participated in 122 games. So it's just part of their success was guys obviously were able to stay healthy. And so, even backups, Ruben Rivera, 95 games, Jim Laird, 62, Archie Cianfrocco, 40 games. So they had guys that played a good amount of games, and their starting rotation had over 30 starts, almost all of them. Kevin Brown had over 30, Andy Ashby over 30, Joey Hamilton over 30, Sterling Hitchcock over 30. So they stayed healthy, and I think that's definitely a big reason why they were able to have that success in 1998 and have their best season in franchise history, in my opinion. And I think this, in my opinion, I know the 84 team went to the World Series and had some great guys there as well, including Tony. I think this was their best team in franchise history. And hopefully there's a team that can surpass the Padres, a single season team that can surpass the Padres' 98-64 record that they had in 1998 and can end up winning it all. And it's unfortunate. I should have mentioned this when I was talking about that 1998 World Series. Man, some tough luck for the Padres. They ran into the literally best team, in my opinion, the best single season team in Major League Baseball history, in that Yankee team. I mean, they had so much talent. I mean, Jeter, Mariano, Scott Brocious, Knobloch. There's so much talent that they had on that team. So it's almost like, obviously it's unfortunate to lose, but it's like, if the Padres were going to lose with that 98 team to anyone, looking back on that, it's like, okay, at least they didn't lose to a team that just got hot. No, this was the best team in Major League Baseball history. So maybe that's a badge of honor. Maybe that's just like, I think to me, it's more just unfortunate, right? It's more unfortunate that they weren't able to play a worse team, a worse American League representative that year, and they could have had a chance. I mean, like I mentioned, they lost a game in that World Series by 1 run. They had a 5-2 lead in game 1. Who knows if that, if they had a call before the Tino Martinez Grand Slam, if that call went their way and was strike 3, who knows how that game, it would have been still was tied. They could have maybe won that game. Who knows? Because they did end up scoring one more run off Mariano, that 6th run, losing 9-6 in game 1. They ended up scoring that run 9-6, losing that game. So they did score after that grand slam, which I think some people might forget. So it's just kind of like bad luck that happened. But this was a really good team. Going back to the WAR leaders in 1998, third was Andy Ashby at 4.6, Coffey at 4.1, Veras at 3.6, Ken Caminiti at 2.7, two seasons after he won the MVP in 96, Sterling Hitchcock at 2.6, Wall at 2.2, Wally Joyner at 2, Joey Hamilton, again, a starter at 1.7, Chris Gomez at short, 1.7, and Tony Gwynn, which I think a lot of casual fans, I was surprised by this. I'm not a casual fan. I'm definitely consider myself at the top of the list among Padre fans, diehard wise. But I did not know that he was 12th. I knew that I definitely knew that he did not have the best Padre season offensively. It was definitely Greg Vaughn and Ken Caminiti had a better season. I knew that. But I was surprised to see that he was all the way down at 12th in WAR at 1.6. So it definitely wasn't his best year. But to be honest, I mean, looking at Tony, he still hit over 300. It's like the guy had a 1.6 WAR and he hit over 300. Like, that's just crazy. And that just shows how good he was. Age 38 season, and he still hit over 300, over 500 plate appearances, almost drove in 70 runs. Yeah, this is when Tony was kind of heavier, so he didn't have the stolen bases, but he did walk a little bit. I mean, my goodness. In 1998, 18 strikeouts only, hit 321, 364 on base percentage, 501 slugging, 865 OPS. I could watch these Tony highlights that you're seeing all day long. 18 strikeouts, and this wasn't one of his best years in a Padre uniform, like a WAR under 2, like struck out 18 times, 18 under 20. Guys strike out 18 times in a couple weeks, it feels like, with Joey Gallo and guys like that this year, or not this year, but the current way of baseball and how it's being played. So it just goes to show you how good Tony was, play discipline wise, and really just sticking with his approach, But so there was 11 guys that had a better WAR in the regular season than Tony did, but he did step up in the postseason. I'm going to say that. But Greg Vaughn obviously was the big catalyst in 1998, having 50 bombs that year. But I could watch these highlights of leading up to the World Series and all day, So I did want to go over this 98 team and just pay respect to them on episode 98 of this Talking Friars podcast. Steve Finley, I did want to touch on him. Shout out to my Aunt Jen. She was a big Steve Finley fan, and still is. So I did want to touch on him. I mean, he stayed healthy. He was like the Manny Machado back then. I know Manny plays infield. Steve didn't. But Steve played 159 of the 162 regular season games. He was obviously big defensively. He only hit 249. He wasn't really known for his offense. There's Flannery. But I think that, he was obviously big in center field with the Gold Gloves, and his defense really played a big factor in this team and through his Padres career, winning Gold Gloves, obviously. So I did want to mention him. But there were so many players just beyond the big guys, the Tonys of the world, Hoffy, Caminetti, Greg Vaughn. There were so many guys that played a big factor in this team, Wally Joyner, Carlos Hernandez. I think that I just don't want to be forgotten about. Even like Joey Hamilton or Sterling Hitchcock, or just Scott Sanders even, in the bullpen. Just I don't want to have those guys being forgotten. And then the coaching staff with Bruce Bochy, obviously, he'll go on. I know he didn't win a World Series with us, but he'd go on to win 3 with San Francisco. Tim Flannery, obviously, as a coach. Davey Lopes is the first base coach. Dave Stewart, pitching coach. Merv Redmond as the hitting coach. It was a good overall organization, good overall team. And just watching these highlights, I know for anyone who's listening on a car ride or whatever, or just listening podcasts, you can watch this video version on YouTube, on the Talking Friars YouTube channel. But these highlights I could watch all day of Trevor closing out games. But it was really a season to remember. It's a season that won't be forgotten, and hopefully it's not the best season. With all due respect to these guys, there's Chris Gomez. With all due respect to these guys, I hope that this season is not the best season that will be in franchise history, because I think that'll be a disappointment. Because I think that the Padres are heading in the right direction for a World Series to be in their future, in their eyesight, I think the way that this organization is being built with Bob Melvin now as the manager, it's going in the right direction. I fully believe it's going in the right direction. But 98 wins will be tough to beat. Obviously, getting past the Dodgers is what you're going to have to get past to win the division, like the Padres did. But obviously, if they get a wild card and then win the World Series, no one cares. It's just make the playoffs. I think you have to make the postseason this year. And I think, obviously, getting past the division series will definitely be a really good step in the right direction. I don't want to put limits on this team right now because the offseason still hasn't concluded. We're still in a lockout. But I think that this team is still heading in the right direction. And I think postseason, even if they don't make any more moves, they bring back Tommy Pham or something, I think the postseason still is definitely an expectation. But I think more is to come. More big moves will come, according to reports and according to things that I've been hearing. So I think it's going to be an exciting year, and stay tuned. Again, we got episode 100 is nearing. I wanted to highlight this 98 team just because there isn't a whole lot to talk about. And I did want to, relive these good days. Well, not relive for me, but for my parents and other people that did, go through this, at Qualcomm there, Jack Murphy. Oh, doctor, man, I could watch this. I wasn't there, but like right now I have the chills just seeing these pictures, because this is what you want to see the Padres. This is what you want to see the Padres do in the clubhouse. You want to see Tatis and Manny doing this, I want to see Myers doing this, I'm getting kind of choked up right now. Like, I want to see Myers. I want to see, AJ Preller in that clubhouse, how he constructed this team. I want to see this. And so hopefully it happens because that would be cool. So just wanted to highlight that. This has been episode 98, episode 98 of the Talking Friars podcast. Again, if you have any content you want me to cover, let me know. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Download it on podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Again, just wanted to highlight that 98 team. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Till next time, let's go Padres, and have a good Monday.